Hey, a little trivia for you. Did you know that gender is a social sciences term from 1955, coined by a sexologist named John Money?
I did not.
Gender is defined as the state of being male or female, typically used with reference to social and cultural differences rather than biological ones. In layman's terms, gender is not your biological sex, but what you mentally think is your sex. Now, some of you might be thinking that the brain is biological, and so there literally couldn't be any separation of your mental state from your biology. To put it another way, there'd be no meaningful separation between the terms gender and sex. But John Money thought differently. He thought if, say, a boy were socialized enough to be a girl, that boy could fundamentally be a girl. That is to say, he thought there were no innate differences between males and females, contrary to the entire field of biology. Now, John Money was unable to get anybody to take his gender pet project seriously until a boy by the name of David Reimer came along.
In a good way.
Upon birth, David lost his willy during the penile mutilation ritual, and so Money found the perfect opportunity to swoop in and perform a bout of human experimentation. He had the infant boy's testicles lopped off, replaced it all with an artificial vagina, and then had the parents raise David to be a girl while undergoing hormone treatments. Furthermore, he had David, as a young child, imitate sex acts with his twin brother to normalize David as a bottom. Money even had the brothers undress and engage in genital inspections, which he took a photograph of on at least one occasion. Money described the experiments as successful, though David never ended up identifying as a woman and described his visits with Money as traumatic. But whatever, close enough. Except that in adulthood, David's brother killed himself by ODing on antidepressants, and David later shot himself in the head with a sawed-off shotgun.
You're always going to see people that are going to say, well, the Dave Reimer case could have been successful. I'm living proof, and if you're not going to take my word as gospel, because I have lived through it, who else are you going to listen to? Who else is there? I've lived through it. Is it going to take somebody to wind up killing themselves, shooting themselves in the head for people to listen?
To this
And
day,
they're still not
there isn't
listening.
a single shred
No,
of
they're
evidence
not.
supporting the existence of gender in humans or the
'Cause
rest
it's
of
just
the animal
one
kingdom for
person.
that matter. So remember, kids, when you use the term gender, you're using the unproven
One
terminology of
person's
a mad
already too
scientist
many.
who happily committed human
But-
experimentation, tortured a pair of twin boys, and drove them both to suicide, and got away with it.
Happy Pride Month.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting you said that it's only one person. I'm looking at, so this is a study that was published in the National Library of Medicine.
Yeah.
It's called An Overview of Depression Amongst Transgender Women,
Do you have a link
and it
to
says,
it?
yeah, I'll
Yeah,
put
throw
it.
me the link. I'll put it up. Not to cut. Sorry to cut you off. Yeah, you throw me links all day, every
No.
day.
I put it in the chat there.
Excellent.
But it says that transgender women experience depression, suicidal ideation, and suicide attempts at rates much higher than the general population.
Oh, jeez.
Here we go. Estimates of the lifetime prevalence of depression in transgender women have been reported as high as 62%. Now, this is from 2014. So keep in mind that this study is older, so these rates could actually be higher now because there are more transgender people.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more people. We're getting to the point where like that kind of first batch of kids that they did this stuff with is starting to get to adulthood. So I think you're seeing a lot of detransitioners as well. But yeah, as high as 62%, while the lifetime depression rate for the general United States population is 16.6%.
Well, don't you know the suicide numbers wouldn't be so high if society was a little bit more accepting. I mean,
But that's the thing is like we're literally in the middle of what
look,
is essentially
we
a
just
national
need
holiday.
We need more Pride Months. We need more magazine covers. We need more trans superheroes in the MCU. There's just not enough. It's just not enough, and it's downright violent if we don't. do it.
And that's the thing is like we're in the middle of a national holiday that's a month long, by the way. So I don't know at what point you can say that like that we've done all that we can, right? And, at what point, or I guess the question is, how much is enough? Because it's not like these people are being ostracized, right? they're able to hold jobs, they're able to get married, they're able to do everything they need to do to be successful in life. Like we aren't doing anything that they don't want us to do, and that's kind of the irony of this entire struggle, right? Is that like there what rights are you fighting for? That there isn't anything that you can't have. And I think most people are saying, like, especially with like, when it comes to the transing the kids issue, like if you want to ruin your life as an adult, that's your business. But, you know, fine, whatever, but leave the kids out of it, right? There's nothing I think in the general public that is saying that like trans people don't exist, as people. Like, yeah, okay, you're a human being, you're worthy of respect just as much as any other person. So what exactly are we fighting for?
But if you don't affirm me, you don't respect me. You're just being rude. It's
And
such a
that goes back to the point we were talking about, right? The idea that if you let your sexuality define who you are as
yeah.
this one singular trait, then, you know, it becomes a problem because the minute somebody denies, no, you're a boy or no, you're a girl, then, your entire reality has been shattered.
Yeah, you pierce the veil. And I have
Mhm.
my brother believes that he is a woman. There's a part of me, if you are living that life, you can surround yourself with people who will, toe that line for you. I feel, and I don't know if this is just me patting myself on the back here, I feel that the more proximal relationships to that person have an even deeper duty not to play the game. Like my parents both go along with it, and I think they failed in their duty to say, this is not true. This is not telling the truth. I won't do it. And if you're going to hold our relationship hostage, well, so be it. They haven't done that. They said, well, I just want my child to be happy. I'll support whatever it is that they want to support as long as they're not hurting nobody. I think the cat's out of the bag on that one. I think the trans movement absolutely hurts people. I mean, look at the. You mentioned to me 63% suicide rate?
62, well, no, this is 62% depression.
Oh,
I'd
right.
have to look through here to see if I can find a suicide rate.
Right.
But I mean, 62% is
Huge.
what, almost six times the
Yeah.
number of people as or transgender women suffering from depression as
Yeah.
people or the rest of the population. That's crazy.
It's huge, and in a more sane world, would say, "Well, why is that happening?" Well, people are saying that, but they're deducing that it's societal acceptance, even though, we're celebrating a pregnant man. Apparently, like we're kicking Pride Month off real strong. That movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Danny DeVito, it's real life now, I guess. Um, I guess I just don't know how much more acceptance. To your question, how much more do they need? How much more acceptance is required? Is it just until the thought is no longer present in anyone's mind? It's like, well, that's kind of weird. It just
I
is
wish I could.
eradicated.
I heard an article when I was listening to another podcast, and it was actually somebody who worked for who I want to see the New York Times trans person who worked for them, and they were
Mm.
talking about how even after they had like a transition surgery and taking hormones, they were still feeling depression, and they even acknowledged in their own article that part of the reason they were feeling depression was from these hormone treatments. And so like
Wow.
I like we know that these things are messing with people's cognitive abilities, and because like that's the entire point. What do you do when a person is depressed? You give them medicine that affects their hormone levels. What do you do when a person has like any sort of other mental illness? You're literally trying to manipulate their hormonal levels to get their brain to act in a normal way. And so like the here we are giving testosterone, incredible amounts of testosterone to women, and or estrogen to men, either way. And we're seeing these huge mental issues crop up, and people are just acting like, oh well, it's actually not happening. They're just trying to brush it under the rug. And I think that's the thing that upsets me the most about this movement, is that it won't even admit that there's, downsides or potential risks to these sorts of things. They just want to pretend that it doesn't happen. And I think that's what people who generally do feel like they're, maybe a man in a woman's body or vice versa, is like, you need to understand that these people don't care about you. They're trying to take advantage of you. And unfortunately, the medical system is right there with them, because these transgender surgeries are extremely lucrative, especially when you consider the fact that, like, you essentially have to keep going back. Like, you don't just get one transitional surgery. Like, you have to keep going back. For example, if you're a man and you get, basically a false vagina, you're basically creating a wound in your body, and that wound is going to try and heal itself because it shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And so you got to go in like every few months to, like, basically make it reopen. And so, like, these things aren't, it's not something that people who care about you would carry out, because they would understand the risks to your mental health. They would understand the physical risks behind it. um there's just, it's really sickening how little these people actually care about, the people who are legitimately having, some sort of issue in their life.
I agree. I think everyone goes through body issues at some point in their life. I think everybody finds a time where they're not satisfied with the way they just come off to people, or where there's a conflict in identity, where you might feel that you're a certain that you might think that there's a certain content about yourself, and that you're being a competent person and a good person, but you might just know somebody who doesn't like you and will not be convinced that you are not a total shithead, and they just don't like you. There's nothing you can do about that. Um, and when it comes to body issues, like, everyone struggles with their weight. No one here is an Adonis, I'm sure you guys have looked in the mirror and haven't been 100% happy with what you see, and have been motivated to try and change that to some degree. And the amount of distress that that causes you might vary day to day, or year to year. I don't know. um, oh fuck, god damn it.
Fair assumption, honestly.
Whoopsie.
What did you do?
I accidentally backed. I clicked the back button, thinking that not it didn't kill the recording. I accidentally hit the back button. Oopsie.
Uh,
Oops. Now we're good to go. Uh. Oh. What
yeah,
was?
so everyone has their uh, own insecurities, basically.
Yes, everyone does. And you were talking about the medicalization of it. Apparently, it's upward to $100,000 a year. Now, it's funny. Google kind of tries to do damage control with this first suggestion. It's like, oh, between 25,000 to 75,000. That's a lot, but it's not nearly as much as some other expensive procedures like defibrillator implants or colon cancer drugs. Like, yeah, I get it. It may not be
But
more
those are to
expensive.
treat life-threatening illnesses.
Yeah, and you also can't convince people they have cancer when they don't.
And people generally don't want cancer.
Yeah, so there's no if they could
Uh,
if there was a way to make money on convincing people that they had cancer so they could give them $200,000 colon cancer drugs,
evil.
they would. They would. I don't understand. I remember going into 2019, everyone thinking that, pharmaceutical companies were literally Satan. But when it comes to their motivations to put people on hormones and surgically alter their bodies to make them fit a false idea of gender, or for the vaccines, it's like, yeah, then they deserve all total trust. And I don't know why they get so mad about discussing the side effects, because I guess it infringes on the idea that this is the right course of action for them. And if it's not the right course of action for them, it invites doubt about whether or not they should. And, what we're finding out is people are having those thoughts anyway after the fact. I heard a depressing tale of girls who got top surgery, had their healthy tits lopped off, and then go back to the doctor saying, "Hey, can I have my tits back? I'm actually not very happy." Terrifying. Like, how do they not know?
I mean, they're being lied to, right? Like, you look at the way the media presents it. In fact, I think there was like fact checking or a fact checking website that was basically saying that no, these surgeries are reversible. And it's like, where are you getting this information?
Yeah.
I just don't understand, like, how you could lie so publicly and not have to face any consequences. But I think hospitals starting are or are starting to face consequences for this stuff, right? Like I
Yeah.
think you are seeing more and more lawsuits, you're seeing more and more laws passed finally because people are starting to realize that like this stuff is happening and it's happening behind the back of the community and parents even sometimes.
Oh yeah, no, and there were people. The idea that the parents are not allowed to be involved, I don't fucking understand it. But check this out. This is something I heard about a little while ago. A Miami sex change surgeon who dubs herself Dr. Titus Deletus is reported to Consumer
Oh,
Watchdog for deceptively luring vulnerable teens into transgender operations with gimmicky TikTok video blitz. What's her name? What's her fucking name? Dr. Sidbe Gallagher. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but Dr. Gallagher, she had on her website, she would take like post-op photos with all of her. Yeah, check it out. She had a trend of taking post-op photos with people who are taking her top surgery, um, but she would be on TikTok saying, oh, I'm so sad. I can't like it's like when a hospital tells me I can't do gender affirmation surgeries there for ethical reasons. I just realized I only get to yeet 4 teats next week. Like she's celebrating, like she's advertising herself. She's trying to grow a business. So I don't know if it's just a person running a practice trying to generate business for themselves, or if they're just actually evil. I'm not quite sure. Could it be both? Could they just be evilly trying to?
I've always accepted with people truly being evil. I just think they know not what they do.
I don't know.
It's hard.
We talked a little bit about like
Hmm.
there's probably probably comes from a place of wanting to do good, but
She
this
probably doesn't even know. She probably thinks she's virtue signaling, and or maybe she doesn't even care about ethics.
that's the thing. I think the scariest thing is people think they're doing good when they're actually doing severe amounts of harm.
Hmm.
Golly. Yeah, so but no, she got reported to this what oh wait, I'm still looking at this tab. Sorry, I meant to switch to this
Okay,
where you can see
fine.
the photos of where she's taking photos.
She's posing with these people.
Yeah, it'll be on the recording, but I want to make sure you guys get a chance to see it too. Yeah,
Yeah, I see.
she's on these, TikToks trying to make her business do better.
I laugh because it's ridiculous and sad.
It's very sad. It's horrible. It's horrible,
Yeah.
and people just go like along with it. Um, but no, she actually got reported to a watchdog. Oh, look at that. The photos are right there. Saying that she severely downplays the side effects and only seems to talk up the benefits, and then it doesn't have an answer for, for people who have issues. But I don't, and people seem really hesitant to point out the fact that a lot of the hormones that they're using are also the same hormones that are given to like, pedophile sex offenders, chemically castrate them. Dude, and I'm depressed because I was talking to a girl who said that she was put on hormone therapy to treat acne at age 9. Why are we? Why? Why is hormone therapy being used as a hammer for everything they think is a nail?
Maybe they want to. Maybe there's a motive to sterilize us. I don't know.
Are they trying to
But
salt the earth and
that's.
say? Are they trying to salt the earth for the
uh,
opposition to say, oh well, hormone therapy is used all the time. It's no big deal. People have perfectly normal lives. It's like, yeah, well, I don't know.
it,
I
it's
he-
like the cigarette thing in the 1900s. Cigarettes cure everything.
well, I hear all
I
the
don't know.
time about.
Medical science.
I don't know about you guys, but I hear all the time about young couples who have difficulty conceiving because they've probably been on some kind of
Oh,
hormone treatment for a
oh
long time.
shit. Yeah, that's another thing.
Like,
There's
my
people who want
cousin,
to
bunch of
have
my
a family
friends, my older
and they're
brother.
sterilized.
Yeah. How about you, Todd? Have you heard anything in that vein? Like the effects of like, why hormone therapy is prescribed for many, many, many different things, and for some reason like, people are suddenly like, "Oh, wow, why are people having difficulty conceiving when they want to have families finally?" Oh, man, I don't even know.
I don't know if it's related to that. Like, I mean, our understanding of how the mind work has increased pretty rapidly, and obviously a lot of that is hormonally tied. It might have something to do with it. Like it is mentioned in a lot of those treatments that a side effect of it might be infertility. But honestly, I think the reason why we're seeing less and less children is because honestly, less and less people want to have children. Like the family is basically just under attack, right? The idea of marriage is not something that is societally accepted really anymore. Like you're basically told that you'll be much more happy if you don't get married, right?
That's what they
Because
say.
what if something goes wrong? What if you don't want to be with that
Um,
person anymore?
Just get
you know it's
divorced. Easy.
it's too much, it's too much
oh
commitment.
no.
And so I think that the real reason we're not seeing the birth rates that we used to isn't necessarily have anything to do with hormones. It just has to do with the fact that having children, having a family is no longer a value in the West.
Yeah, it could be both. Column A, column B on this.
True. Yeah, and like I said, for a lot of hormonal treatments, they do say basically like, hey, this is a side effect of it, right? Like, for example, my wife has PCOS and she has to take birth control. And so, quite frankly, if she wants to treat it, she has to be on birth control. And so, obviously, when we do want children, when we do have to do with that, or when we want to have children, excuse me, we're going to have to deal with the side effects of dealing with PCOS. And so that's just one of those things that we'll have to live with. But that's a pretty extreme example. But I'm sure if you looked at other hormonal treatments for other conditions or mental illnesses, that is also probably listed there, is like it increases the difficulty of pregnancy.
Yeah.
So
Speaking of PCOS, why does like 1 in every 3 women I talk to have PCOS?
I don't know. I know that it's genetically linked. It's a relatively new uh, discovery, I guess you could say. Like we didn't
Yeah.
really know a lot about it until recently. I'd have to ask my wife more about it because honestly, she knows more about it than I do.
Is it
So
possible it's got something to do with diet and insulin? Because I've been watching a lot of documentaries lately about how
it
the American diet is basically trash, and a person on the American diet has no hope of actually being healthy if they follow it and maybe deviate once in a while.
it probably does have something to do with it, but what is the American diet? I'm curious. Is it like fried foods for every meal? Like,
Oh
because
no, like the government recommended food groups and servings, like
oh
the
yeah,
standard
well
American diet.
we know that. I mean, we've known for a while now that the food pyramid was a lie.
Oh
So
yeah, no kidding. But how long did we abide by that? I'm young enough. I'm old enough to remember when I was sitting in a doctor's office and they were instructing me about the food pyramid and how that worked.
yep.
So
They
it's
taught me at school.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all got it taught the food pyramid in like elementary school health classes, but turns
Mhm.
out it should be basically inverted, you
mm,
know.
yeah, no kidding.
So,
I have been eating nothing but beef for the last 3 weeks. Both of my parents have been on a diet. My mom started Weight Watchers. My father started keto, and I just wanted to sympathetically join in by just going on an elimination diet. I did beef because it was an easy staple. It was easy to get. Fast
mhm.
food places offer it. Don immediately thought I was Don and Ruben both thought I was doing it because of Jordan Peterson. He inspired it, I guess, but I started adding one new item every week. First, I added avocados because I wanted some fiber and an easier source of fat. And then I added, I'm starting tomatoes. I'm adding tomatoes for potassium and additional fiber, a little bit more protein. But I don't know. What we're learning about we have such a carb heavy diet. Like once you start paying more attention to what you eat, it is impossible to find things that are not just completely loaded with sugar. I have to find like 2 or 3 reliable snacks, and that's about it.
You need to. I think the easiest thing to do is make sure you're making a lot of your own food, or
Yeah,
like if you are going to have easy to eat food, yeah, you're really gonna have to,
yeah.
excuse me, go through it and make sure that you're careful about what you're getting.
Yeah, and when I was my aunt is like super pro vaccine, and I know most of it. Like I'm we have different opinions about the vaccine. Hindsight's 2020, and now that the CDC is actually on record saying, yeah, we lied basically about half the shit we said it did, I'm upset. But my aunt was making the case that I told my aunt, it's like, if you're so upset about COVID, why don't we start working on reducing the comorbidities? Like, everyone's a fat shit. How about we work on that? He's like, well, you can't catch obesity. It's like, yeah, the fuck you can. Like, where the fuck do you think kids learn it? Where do
Yeah.
kids learn it? But like, obviously it's not a condition. You can't cough on somebody and give them obesity. Like, I couldn't help Linston out by coughing in his general direction so he can gain a couple pounds. But
It would help.
Well, so I think the two biggest contributing factors to death by COVID were your age. So if you
mhm,
were elderly, you were very susceptible. I think that was number one.
yeah,
And number two was heart disease.
yeah, no kidding. But apparently what we understand about heart disease is even uh like the idea the idea that it's cholesterol and that your diet is linked to the amount of cholesterol. It's not even settled, I don't think. A lot of misconceptions about
Well, I mean, heart disease is linked to obesity, right?
yeah,
So the idea is like if you are eating a lot of carbs and, a lot of processed fats,
yeah,
then you're going to have obesity. And if you have obesity, you're more susceptible to heart disease.
yeah.
Oh,
And I think it's because the heart essentially is just a muscular pump, and when you make it work harder, there's like you can go to the gym, work out any other part of your body. You can even work out your diaphragm. They did it in Mr. Olympia contest. They'd make a show out of blowing a giant balloon to show your lung power. But if you're um, there's no way to improve the skill of your heart. It's like an engine. It's like the engine piloting your machine. And if you have a machine that's just full of fat and grease and it's awful, it's like there's no way. There's no way it's gonna cut it. It's gonna cut it. Um, so I think I think I think what we're finding out, like, so I wonder how many young women who grew up today are growing up who present with PCOS and all these other issues, also have maybe a less than ideal relationship with their own food as a sort of, and like everyone has this problem where they think of meals as this very leisurely thing that they have and have to enjoy. Motherfucker, I've been eating the same like form of meat for the last 3 weeks. It's not exactly fun, and I actually kind of do it all in one sitting just so it's done and out of the way and I don't have to worry about it. But man, the people I know who need eating to be this really, really comfortable, enjoyable thing 3 times a day, it's starting to get weird to me.
I think that you can eat to enjoy your food, but I think
Yeah,
you also need to practice moderation, right? I think
yeah,
that is the most important thing, right? Like if I don't know if there's necessarily anything wrong with
mm,
eating to survive, but also I think food is such a, and I'm not even talking about in American culture, I'm talking about human culture, right? Food is ingrained in our culture. You
oh
look
yeah,
at the way every single culture around the world, interacts with food. How do you do it? It's around the table with your family. It's supposed to be
yep.
shared. And so I think that making food enjoyable, there's nothing wrong with it.
No,
But
you're right.
I think it's hedonism, right? Like
Yes.
if the enjoyment of the food becomes the single most important thing, then it becomes excessive. And if it becomes excessive,
Yeah.
it's no longer healthy.
Just like anything, yeah. You've been making this point about video games too. That anything in
Yep.
excess gets really bad, and we've been kind of going back and forth on the video games thing. And the thing that I hate, the reason why I don't like video games right now, isn't that I think that itself is the problem. Um, that's kind of a cool image. It's because I see the video game industry as creating people who will become gluttonous, and there are industries that maybe don't do it, but over here in the West, it's just the worst ever. Like, I'm still salty about the news of Overwatch 2 PvE getting canceled. I'm still upset. I'm still inconsolable. I'm upset because like, at this point, it just seems like the entire thing was just a cash grab. It just seems like the entire thing was just for money. And I understand that
Well,
every industry has to do that, but
I
to this
mean, there's
extent,
making money, but then there's like I think Don brought it up in the last podcast, right? The influx of corporatism in Western culture.
Hmm.
Like everything's got to be so corporate now. Everything is like, you know, basically like a nice little assembly line of like, you know, create product, consume product, create more product sort of
Yeah.
thing. And so a lot of Western games are just set up to be like, I think the best example of this are the what are they called? The games like PUBG,
Yeah.
battle royales, right?
Yeah.
Like you go in, you fight a bunch of other people, and then maybe you die, so you get out of that game and you start a new game, and you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I think PUBG, like your squad is like 3 people or something like that. It's not a very big group.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a funny story, but
Yeah.
um, anyways, I it's like the game has lost its value, right? It's no
Yeah.
longer about having a meaningful experience or providing an environment, a social environment that you and your friends can have fun in. It's just about repeating the same thing over and over again and getting
Yeah.
those small dopamine hits.
Well, you're more
Because
like,
if you
yeah, you're more likely to hit the button if you stay a lot longer in the Skinner box. Duh.
Right. And so I think like that is kind of the big difference between the design influence in the West and that in Japan, right?
Yeah.
Because Japan tends to focus around making a video game, something
Yeah.
that's fun for a limited amount of time. And like even their games that have DLCs like Monster Hunter, right? Like you're not just rinsing and repeat. Like it's got a game cycle. Monster Hunter might have a similar cycle, but the difference is that there's an end to Monster Hunter. There
Yeah.
is no end to PUBG. You keep getting on to do the same thing over and over again. But like Monster Hunter, there's actually an end to the story. There's a storyline that you follow, and then it's over. And if you want to keep playing afterwards, you can if you want to, but you don't have to. And every time they introduce a new monster, there's a new little bit of story to go along with it. But then it's over with. So as soon as you get the armor set from that monster, you're done, But so I don't know. Like I think that we need to stop looking at everything through this corporate lens in America. And I
Yeah.
think once we start doing that, we will start being healthier again as a society.
Well, I think Japan just makes their money in different ways because, I think the gimmick in Japan is they make these video games, they make these cheap animes, and then they just merchandise the fuck out of all of it. And I think they don't need to make the game they don't have to put loot boxes in their games or battle passes in their games because like they just sell toys and land and theme park experiences. So let me see how much does Mario merchandise make a year? Yeah, I wonder. Holy shit. Let's see. Their licensing revenue. I just saw the figure here. Nintendo sold almost 100 million of its Wii consoles.
Well, that's not merchandising. That's the
Yeah.
product.
Licensing revenue was just 5.7 billion yen. That's 4.2 million. 1% of overall sales, a tiny fraction of what Disney earns from the likes of Mickey Mouse, Toy Story,
I
Winnie the
was I was
Pooh.
gonna say if you bring up merchandising, that's really a Western thing too.
That's
That
all.
isn't to
Yeah.
say that they don't do it with a lot of their stuff, but it's just not as big of a deal. They just don't own as much shit in Japan as we do here in the U.S. Right?
That's
Like
true.
first of all, their homes are a lot smaller, so they don't have space for all of it.
I just got
But
yeah, I got fact checked in real time here, but I've heard that about anime because anime famously can get really fucking cheap, right? Uh,
yeah, but I mean, I think that like I don't know if necessarily because like people tend to associate anime with Japan, like
yeah.
thinking that all Japanese are into anime, and it's not true. Like it's a smaller subsection of the culture.
Oh, I
In
know.
fact, And so like I think that like probably all of them have probably seen anime or watch anime, but it's not like everyone is obsessed with it over there,
No, I
you
get you,
know.
and I'm not. I'm just interested in how much they make because the global anime market size was valued at USD 24.5 billion in 2021, expected to reach a value of 47.14 billion. Jesus, almost doubling in just 6 years. That seems pretty significant.
I think part of that is because Western media is so garbage.
Also
Like
true.
if you look at manga sales compared to comic book sales right now,
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
manga is absolutely destroying comics, and it's because manga knows what the reader wants, and they're going to give them to him.
Yeah. So let's see. The anime market is constantly expanding thanks to fans from all over the world. So that's probably why the anime market can just be exported literally everywhere and anywhere,
Hmm.
and is. I think anime is absolute trash. Beyond the early aughts, I think Cowboy Bebop is great. I think Outlaw Star is great. The Japan have a really weird idea of sexualizing female characters because they always do it really really young. But if I'm ever doing anything Japan related, it's always in manga because I think the animation is never as good as the actual art. Um, yeah, I don't want to talk too much more about anime before people think I'm a fucking weeb. But like the point I'm making is that Japan doesn't. My thesis is this, right? Japan doesn't have to monetize its games because its merchandising is what offsets that. And I guess we could just say there's some ethical value that the Japanese are holding to, where they just don't feel the need to do it, and they're insulated from the corporate greed that is ever encroaching in the West. And maybe that's true.
Well, I think it is because you look at the way their culture is set up, right? Like when you do some task, right? You're given a task in Japan, like you care about what you're doing, right? The
Oh,
Japanese people tend to care a lot more about their work. They're a lot more invested in whatever company they're in. And I think it shows in their products. They just make a better product because it's not about making something that can just be repeated repetitively consumed, right? It's about making the best thing that you can. And if you don't make the best thing that you can, then you're considered a failure. And obviously the Japanese culture has plenty of
yeah,
of issues. For example, just that, right? Like if you fail, then you are kind of ostracized, and they have a huge problem with suicide in their country because of things like that. And so, I think that their like focus on making like truly caring about whatever you're doing shows in a lot of their products, including video games, because they treat it like an art medium. They don't treat it like like a consumer product. It's not a product to them, it's a piece of art. Like
yeah.
the last Monster Hunter game that came out, I was discussing this with a friend. Like the first of all, the music for those games is absolutely phenomenal. I highly recommend checking some of it out if you haven't. It's like it's basically modern classical music. It's very well done.
That is
But
a statement for sure.
I mean, like that the Ace Combat series, I highly recommend checking out some of the music from these games because they are absolutely wonderful. But anyways, they released like a little, I don't know what you would call it, almost like an album of like different covers, I guess you could say, on some of the game music, and it was like beautifully composed and well done, and you could tell that they had taken a lot of time and thought and how that they were going to do this. And I was talking to my friend about it. I was like, you'd never see this with a game here in the West. Like this never happens. But like
Yeah.
it's like we value our products so much that we're willing to like go and make like more music for it that has nothing, it's not even in the game, you know.
Well, what I'm trying to find out though is, what is Japan's attitude towards things like loot boxes and battle passes? Because those are that's the mechanism of how these games, like more companies are doing free live services that make money and just claw money, and they go into and they like they psychologically evaluate what will keep the player engaged, what will keep them more likely to spend money, how many barriers between them and their wallet can we the us and their wallet can we remove. Amazon did that. Like you know that Amazon button like buy now, so you don't even have to go to your cart. Like you remove those barriers, and people will press that Skinner button so fucking fast. Um, I'm just skimming right now, but it looks like Japan actually bans or has severe or heavily regulates battle loot boxes. So there's no incentive to do. There's no incentive. I'm sure like when you make it when you tie it up in legalese, it's just not attractive to do that. But I want to know about battle passes because I think battle passes are the new fucking scourge of Western gaming, and I think I like loot boxes better because I shit man. I think I like loot boxes better because if there was that legendary Sombra skin in Overwatch, I could just throw dollars at the screen until I get the loot box that has it, or I can sink 5-6 hours into the game just to level up shit. If I get the standard, if I get the premium battle pass for like $25, I hate it. I hate it so much, and it's probably the thing that killed Overwatch 2. To be honest with you, was the monetization of the battle pass is a little too successful. But yeah, and so video to kind of tie it all in, it's all about things becoming a fixture that has way too much prominence in someone's life, whether it's their gender identity, whether it's video games, whether it's food. People. The way I see it is, people are serving a god whether they realize it or not, and the thing that they set aside for that thing for which they set aside all other things, that's their god. That's their religious instinct. It may as well be. And so people are fulfilling a religious instinct I don't think they realize.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
What kills me is the idea there is some this is something that doesn't even apply to the LGBT the people of gender, right? Which is even straight people have been convinced that sexual hedonism and living in the moment, living for you and your subjective impulsive pleasure, that's the pathway to self-actualization as a human being. Where'd that come from? How did we get how did we stumble upon that idea?
Well, I think you answered your own question, right? The idea that you're serving a god whether you know it or not. So, you know, if if life is about finding meaning, right? Then where do you go to look for it? There's plenty of places. There's potentially one right place, right? Spirituality.
Yeah.
I would argue that there is one God that you can go to for the correct spirituality because, I'm a believer and you would probably make the same argument as me.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that everyone makes that argument or, unfortunately thinks that that's a good thing because they are looking for short-term happiness. They like the dopamine hits, right? They like how they feel after that one act, and so
Yeah.
and they miss it. And so rather than like searching for something that is actually going to help them develop long-term happiness, they just keep going back to that dopamine hit.
Is it because it has a tangible and effect on our I guess our psych what would you say? It has like a neurological effect on us. Is that why people would rather, prop up a false god in the form of experiences and pleasure because they can see it, it's tangible, they can feel it. Like a trip to Japan to go jerk off to anime, that that's a better god than say the god of the Abrahamic faiths because I'm actually interacting and experiencing this stuff. It's having a direct feedback loop. It's plugged right into my dopamine system. I'm just cooming all over the place, but I can actually feel that. It's like, is that why? Is it because it's tangible and it actually has an effect on that as far as what they can tell, it has an effect on them? Is it easier to prove that it exists, I guess?
Well, it's the first thing that you feel and the first thing that comes to your mind. And people, even I'm guilty of it. It's easier to just go with what you first feel, your first inclination, rather than to give it a deeper thought and stop and ask yourself, is this worth it? And what a lot of people don't know is that it's all temporary. It's never gonna feel that void in you.
So how do you convince people that the long term is better than the short term?
So you tell them first, and then they have to make the choice for themselves. It
Well,
all requires a desire. You can't change it. You can try to instill or, plant a seed in them and then, you know, nurture it long.
well, let's
You do
try it.
you do all of this with love at the end of the day.
Let's try it like this. If I asked you, Linston, should a person desire long-term gain over short-term gain? What would you say?
I think, well, what I think is it matters what it is.
Sure.
But ultimately, long-term goals are good because you're planning farther ahead rather than just how you're gonna get by tomorrow.
Well, if it's something that takes longer to plan for the same reward as the short-term thing, something's missing because if the difference is
Yes.
like let's just say 1 unit of dopamine for right now or 1 unit of dopamine for later, all you're doing is creating a barrier to that dopamine in the form of time. So
Yeah. So then you should ask yourself, is this the right thing then? If it's just, all that
sure,
matters is the dopamine.
depends on what you're spending that time for. I would make
Well,
the case.
Mm,
Go ahead,
I
Todd.
think I think that you're looking at it the wrong way, right? You're saying
yeah.
one dopamine now or one dopamine later. It's not
Because even
about
if it's the right thing, it's
Right.
for the wrong reason,
Oh,
which is
and I know what you're saying, Todd, and I'm just kind of working through what Linston was saying. I know how I would make the case. I want to see if Linston is able to make the case. Not saying that you can't. I just try to push the articulation a
yeah.
little bit. So how would you explain? Okay, so now someone says, well, if I can have one dopamine later or one dopamine now, Linston, why would I have the dopamine later? What's obvious to me is you're trying to make the case that the dopamine they'll get later is either better or there's more of it, right? The reward is greater for the investment. Would you say?
The amount of dopamine is greater.
I'm trying. I'm making it. I'm reducing it down to units so I can just make it tangible in the form of numbers. But the case that you're making, or the case that would be made that someone should favor the long term, is that the rewards are richer for the investment of time, for the deferment, for the sacrifice, than the things they could have right now. Right? Would you say that's right?
Yes.
So how would you make the case? How would you help? What would you say to try to convince somebody that the deferment of gratitude of gratification now will in fact be better later? How would you go about trying to convince this person of that who's asking, well, why wouldn't I just
Uh,
take it now?
investment. You, you know, you put something aside so that you can have more of it later. I think of like, kind of like plants or farming.
Yeah,
You don't harvest all of the fruits and vegetables. You harvest some of them so that you can still have some later,
right.
and maybe even in a better quantity or even of a better quality as well.
But
Well, I don't know.
it's not just about the quantity, is it? Right? Because like
No,
if you could have one dopamine,
quality will always supersede quantity, in my
yeah,
opinion.
there is a richness to the reward for the deferment of time that's a little bit more than just the quantity. Because like let's break it down like in units of time and units of individual units, right? If you could have one dopamine now, or you could have three dopamine if you waited. Let's say you can have one dopamine an hour, right? One dopamine an hour, that's your limit. Or you can have three dopamine in 3 hours. That still equates to one hit an hour. So you then have to make the case that the reason why you're deferring it is not merely to have more of it. There's something else that is enriching it. And when we talk about why do we want to why is it important that we make our own food? Why do we grow crops? Why is it important that we sweat and toil now so that when the winter comes we have food? Well, the real question is, well, what is that food for? What is that? Who is that investment for? And if the investment is just for you, then I don't really think it matters if you have it an hour later. But if you're like, well, I need to feed my family, I need to feed my wife, I need to feed my grandkids, I need to feed my family, suddenly it's not about what is satisfying to you. It's about what's beyond and outside of you, right?
No longer about the self.
What's that?
No longer about only the self.
Right, right. Would you? How does that hit your ear, Todd? Is that about right? Do you think if you want to make the case that to somebody that it's better to sacrifice and defer gratification, it's because there's something richer about what it yields?
I think that basically it's not necessarily one dopamine because like I don't think of fulfillment as dopamine, right? Like
Right.
we talk about dopamine hits because it's a singular instance, right? It's like
Yeah.
you get it and then it's over with. But fulfillment is a long term happiness. And I don't know if maybe dopamine is associated with that. Maybe it's just like a dopamine release over time.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that like you're giving up this dopamine hit now for this long-term happiness, this long-term fulfillment.
Yeah.
And
And
so you're giving up a single instance of happiness for
yeah.
continual happiness.
Yeah, and so I would say I'm using dopamine as a stand-in
Right.
metaphorically here, but I would say the
Right.
fulfillment is probably a stronger a gratification than when anytime I go outside and I do yard work and I come in sweating hot and just having felt like I just put a good day's work and I feel really good. I didn't get anything out of it. In fact, I probably it's mortification it's mortification and deprivation in a lot of ways, but it feels good.
Well, you did get something out of it, right?
No, yeah.
You worked your body, and also you
Yeah.
brought organization
Yeah.
to your immediate surroundings, right? What you
Yeah.
own. And so you're essentially working in creation.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You're being a steward for your property,
Yeah.
and that is fulfillment. That's part of, our existence,
Yeah.
especially if you're looking at it from a religious perspective, right? We're supposed to be stewards of what we're given. That's
Yeah.
the whole parable of the talents, right?
Mhm.
Like you're supposed to preside over what you've been given and increase its worth. And so by doing that yard work, you have participated in self actualization, right?
Yeah.
You've done something creative and basically created benefit for yourself. Now when you look out the window, you can see your neatly manicured yard, right?
Yeah. But
And
it's
that
not
brings that sense of satisfaction to you.
Oh yeah, but it's not going to be right now. Right now the only thing in my front yard is a giant circle of, topsoil because the seeds haven't taken yet. I'm just planting
Right.
some grass. So
You'll reap those rewards later. Yeah.
exactly. So the
Yeah.
organization I get, the stewardship, like, and I'll find out down the line if it's even good. And it could be that I did a shoddy job laying down grass seed. It could be that I don't water it enough. It could be that anything could happen where even the fruits of my labor are not, to par, where I don't actually fix the problem. So who
But
knows
then you
whether.
just keep working on it, right?
Yeah,
Like it's
exactly.
a continual process.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, you'll get to a point where you are deriving
Yes.
satisfaction from it.
Yeah, and it's just like I have to work for that satisfaction, and just because I'm working doesn't necessarily mean that I'll get it. Also, it's you know, the fruits of my labor will indicate the efficacy of my labor, and it may not it might if it's shit work, it'll be a shit fruit too.
Hmm.
But yeah, and so and if we're gonna try and tell people that you don't want to live for impulsive pleasure in the moment, you don't want to live for hedonistic encounters, you don't want to have hookups, you don't want to just eat that cake because it's presented to you, even though cause I used to that I when it came to my diet, it was that way where I realized it was an appetite of impulses. And you have that one meal that just satisfies you so much. Like it was like a chicken joint where I got a side where I got a nice plate of wings, very delicious, and a dessert of Oreo churros, so fucking good. So fucking good. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It was a completely satisfactory meal. Everything came out just right. The beer was perfectly cold. Nothing was too dry. Everything hit. Just so good. And then it was a curse because everything I had after that was kind of chasing that dragon of that culinary experience. Like I'm not even kidding. Like I'd go out hoping for a meal that just completely hits and something goes wrong. Nothing was ever so good. And I realized like I'm just trying to find the same experience I had 2 years ago. This must be what a drug addict feels like. Oh, that really good high that I had. I just need to get back to that. And if I get back to that, I'll be satisfied and I can put it behind me.
But imagine if you had made that meal yourself.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
And imagine if you had continued making different meals, like and getting the
Yeah.
satisfaction from the process as well. Like, yeah, this is something I created.
Yep.
And so that's like the difference, right? Like you were chasing this high that somebody else gave
Yeah.
you that was short term. But now imagine if you had practiced,
Yeah.
making that meal. Imagine if you were able to make it over and over and over again for friends and for family, like,
Yeah.
and you perfected it, like how much more satisfying it would be. Not only because you are providing work for yourself and you're improving your skills and you're producing something that you enjoy, but also you're able to now share that with other people.
Yeah, and
And
that's it. And there you go. That we're talking about going beyond just outside your own interests again. I
Mhm.
personally find more gratification cooking for others than myself. I'm okay, but I'm also the kind of maniac that can just have the same thing every day. So, but the appeal of that restaurant meal was that I didn't have to spend the time cooking it for myself. All I had to do was fork over money, and it was brought to
Yep.
me. I didn't have to put the time in. I didn't have to invest. Um, and then fuck, man, you know how taco. When I was younger and working in a movie theater, a lot of my coworkers and I would take breaks, and we would go to the Taco Bell across the street from our theater, and there was a menu item called the chicken flatbread sandwich. Have you guys ever had that one? It was like back in like 2012, 2013 maybe.
I
No.
think I remember it vaguely.
Oh my god, it was so good. Like soft, chewy flatbread chicken with Alfredo sauce, and then the item got retired. I had like 10 of these motherfuckers a week. So fucking good. Like anytime movie theater break time, that's where I was. And then they retired the item, and I was upset. And then like a year ago, I discovered that they have a very similar item, which is just the same chicken, the same sauce. It's just wrapped in a tortilla this time, but it felt the same. It just wasn't in a flatbread. So
Mhm.
there I was. I found my dragon had left me, and then I found my dragon again. But it's funny. You can actually find a self-satisfying reason, to change your behavior too. Like I was at a book study with some friends, and the host of the book study put out a really good spread of food. Lots of good fish. Made a dish of Brussels sprouts, uh, some pasta too. She went all out to make sure people had a lot to eat, and I didn't have a bite of it. I didn't have a bite of it because I really I see I started this all beef diet, and I'm introducing foods to see what the effect of the foods will be. If my energy is better, if my urges and my cravings are in check, like what will change, what won't change. And so far I haven't had any drastic changes, but I didn't want to taint the experiment by introducing an unanticipated variable where I wouldn't be able to derive where the change was linked to. And even though I really wanted to tear into that food, it was more valuable to me to preserve the experiment that I was doing than to enjoy that impulsive pleasure. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why that's so appealing to me, but it's like I really want to see what the results of these are. So preserving my diet and preserving the efficacy of what changes are accounted for what food types, that was more interesting to me than that impulsive pleasure of having good food in the moment.
Right.
I'm not really doing that for anybody but myself. So it really just, you got to choose what God you decide to serve, really. Is it one that's just going to be in the moment, or do you have something that you're working towards? How about you, Linston? Do you have any long-term goals that you're working towards that you find challenged?
Yeah, seeking truth.
What does that look like for you, seeking truth? How do you, when you go out and you start seeking truth, how are you verifying what is true and what's not?
Like that's the thing. I get more confused the harder I look. But that's the hard part is knowing and confirming.
Yep.
And that's honestly part of the adventure for me
Hmm.
is finding out how to knowing and then confirming what is true and not.
Right. Do you start with like a set of first principles that you consider to be true, like unmutable truth? Is there
Oh,
any?
well, I have my creed to go off by as a Catholic. That's my foundation.
Mm-hmm. The the
There is a
Nicene
God.
Creed. Oh, right.
Mhm. and that I believe in the Holy Apostolic Church.
Mm-hmm. The
I
what?
can't
Holy.
recite it. I can't recite it word for word. I'm
Not,
still learning it myself.
neither can I. Don't you worry.
Mhm.
Um, um, for
So
me,
I try to place perfect trust in God. That's where I start with, and then I go from there seeking truth.
mm, I, with my brother who is living as a woman, and the conversations I have with my parents about, what is it that we all see when this is happening, because it's important to at least, I always say, right, um, clarity before agreement, but I don't even have clarity with my parents, because I see my brother as somebody who is confused and is ill and is not getting the treatment. My parents see a woman and they will refer to him as a woman. And I'm like, so wait, do you guys actually think he's a woman, or is this just something is this something you understand is just what he's dealing with right now? And
Yeah.
they
May
say
I bet that they're doing it for the sake of your brother's comfort?
they also do it because it's easier now, because they've dug themselves into this hole of, well, now I've told all my friends I have a daughter who graduated from this college, and what, and then if I go back to saying that they're my son, and they
You're
ask me they ask me what that's they ask me, it's like, wait a minute, I thought you had a daughter, I just really would rather not have that conversation, they tell me. So it's like, well,
that,
you
that
realize,
sounds like covering up a lie to me.
yeah, it's a position where it's easier to lie than to tell the truth, and we've all dealt with that when we were kids. Hey, how'd this vase break? I don't know. Where the fuck is?
It's comfort-based decisions, honestly. It's more
Yes,
comfortable to do this,
yeah,
and I'm gonna do this for the sake of my comfort rather than for the
yeah.
sake of truth.
But now, what I get asked all the time is, how do you know what truth is? And what my
Hmm.
operating
It,
answer has been, I don't know what truth is, but I know what's not. I know what a lie is.
yeah, I don't know what truth is, but I know it is. I know it exists. I know it's out there, and
Yeah,
I know if something's not true.
yeah. I
Well,
and
I think that you can say I know what some truths are,
yeah,
correct? Like
Mm,
there are certain immutable laws. For
yeah,
example, I know
yes.
that gravity exists. That is a truth, right?
Yeah.
Why do we know this? Well, because we're stuck to this planet. I know, for example, the truth that the world is round, right? And
sure,
Hmm.
and there's certain truths that you can point to. And so if these
Yes.
facts exist, then there must be, singular truths for everything, correct? And
yeah,
so that's the way I look at it. And you might not know uh, a truth, right? You might not be familiar, like, for example, like, I don't
like
know, dark
how,
matter, for example, or something
sure,
like that, because we don't know for sure yet, or something like that.
yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there isn't a truth associated with that.
And it can be things that you don't have to know. It's impossible to know everything. Like, I didn't know how much money Japan made on certain markets
Right.
until I went out and found it. So it's all about, okay. So what are the more fundamental truths? And a Jordan Peterson podcast, he said there probably isn't a more fundamental biological truth than sex differentiation,
Hmm.
because it is the way a species propagates. If you can't identify the opposite sex with which you can propagate, then you don't propagate. And things that inform whether or not you propagate are probably closer to the fundamental truth. It's probably as fundamental as up and down, or left and right, or light and dark. And so I feel like you got to start with your fundamental truths, even if you
Uh,
don't
but
know.
even if you do, you have people, flat earthers, who say the same exact thing. What is up, and what is down.
Do they really say
Uh,
that? I know they say the
Yeah,
Earth is flat, but up is up and down is down.
they say yeah, they do. They start with those
I can't.
things. And they say that's what truth is, and then
Oh.
they so you have people even saying those kinds of things.
Well, I guess the only answer is to sharpen your arguments and try to, I guess, articulate your point. Even if you were to argue with the flat earthers about whether or not the Earth is flat, what you're not really like. I realize that in a debate, you're not really trying to change the other person's mind. You're trying to change the minds. You're trying to provide information to the undecided listeners who don't know yet and haven't figured it out yet and are looking for information to support one or the other. And that'll influence where they lean. The stronger argument will end up, I think, influencing where they lean.
Yeah, I think you can have a debate to try and change somebody's mind too, but it's going to have to be their decision, right? You can present
Yes.
all the facts you want to a flat earther, and unless they choose to, acknowledge those facts,
Yeah.
then they're going to continue to have their old belief. But that doesn't change the fact that what you're saying is true, right? Like you can present the experiments that were done to prove that the Earth is round, like and say, here, look at these, and they can choose to look away or they can choose to accept what you're showing them as fact, and or they can go and try and do the same experiment themselves. Like there was, I think, a story about that with some flat earthers actually, where they, basically went and set up an experiment where they were like trying to prove that the Earth was flat, and in doing so, because they were looking through a pinhole to try and like figure out where this camera was. They realized that the Earth was round because they couldn't see straight across to this camera over a long
Yeah.
distance, and so like it's just those sorts of things where like if the truth is exists, which it does, then it's worthy of seeking after.
Yeah.
And that's the takeaway, right? Like you should be actively seeking after the truth, and anyone that tells you they know everything there is to know about something is probably lying to you.
Yeah. And even if they're not telling, they don't even have to tell you they know everything. Even if they are constantly saying this one thing that is not true is true, uh, that's also something to avoid. It's people are very confidently presenting false things as true because there's a motivation to do so. I don't always know what the motivation is, um, but the truth
Another
is
thing
always
I
worth pursuing.
Yeah, another thing I like to use is the scientific method, which ironically, uh, I've noticed many scientists not use anymore, but
Oh yeah,
it's just testing your own hypothesis and until it's disproven.
did you guys hear about the study about this male breastfeeding and the study on male breastfeeding?
Mm, no.
The conclusion ended up being what they found out was that, yeah, a man actually can output a substance that has more lipids and proteins than mother's milk does, but that's about it. And at the caveat is never in the volume that would allow that person to be the sole source of nutrition. First of all, there's no way that shit's not polluted with hormones. And you're not also feeding the child a shit ton of estradiol. But the conclusion of the paper, I shit you not, was we should redefine our idea of success because allowing trans people to breastfeed is empowering, and if we don't let them do it, it's not inclusive. So we should just not worry about whether or not the infant in question is getting enough nutrition as our goalpost for success. We just
It's
consider it successful.
ridiculous.
They can do it at all. Literally change the definition of success. Let's just change our outcomes to suit our experiments, or it's wild to
It's
me.
wild. Yes,
Yeah,
it's
Moving
very wild.
goalposts,
and it's always moving goalposts. I feel like.
but might be a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm feeling the same. We're already an hour in. Does it feel like an hour in? That's
I
after
think
the.
we're 2 hours in, dude.
I
Feels
was gonna
longer than
say
an hour.
hour. Well, I was gonna say hour in, not accounting for the kerfuffle. I'm so. Does the recording mishap feel like it was an hour ago?
Was it?
I think we started recording 2 hours ago.
Yeah,
almost.
yeah, that's what I mean. But I can't believe, like, we had to do another recording because I fucked it up, and I'm saying
Oh.
it's already been an hour since then. That went by
Okay.
for me.
Oh,
Oh, I
I
see.
see.
Yeah. No, that the hour since redoing. All right,
I
but let's go ahead.
understand.
Yeah, but let's go ahead and pack it in. We'll have to do something more fun for the next stream because I know we'll have Ruben back. Not stream, recording. I'm not brave enough to stream just yet, but maybe one day. Anyway, let's go ahead and pack it in.
Baby steps. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, hey, this has been Linston, this has been Todd, and this has been Lamar with the Meat Robots. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.